store, but over the years have made a few changes to their model and have started adding additional lines of retail, things for people to purchase when they come in. Because again, when people come in, you got to sell them something. So Reed's department stores in a few towns across the South in Mississippi, and they do men's, women's, and children's clothing, but they also have a gift store where a lot of local bridal or wedding parties go to sign up. They have a bookstore where oftentimes they'll bring in authors to do book signings. And then they also offer a barbershop. So the idea there is to get people in your store and sell them something.
Yeah, you know, Will, something to add about Reed's is they've done a good job. I mean, they've been around for 109 years, but they've done a really good job if you go to their website, they've got an online platform where you can actually shop online. So they've done a really good job about maintaining that brick and mortar location in a downtown, but also focusing on, you know, the consumer that's out of town, the consumer that wants to shop online as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Aaron. You know, and if you don't really have, if you're a mayor of a small town that doesn't really have that existing department store that's been there for a while, but you do have people in town who do have the means to maybe invest in something and want to invest in the local community, you know, one thing that I would offer and suggest is encourage them to look for some franchise opportunities. A lot of times, these are low cost, and these concepts have been around a while, and they are proven, and sometimes they do work in a downtown setting. And so for those for those people in your markets, in your town that say, Mayor, you know, we want to invest, we want to help our downtown grow, what can we do? What can we do? You know, encourage them, if they don't have an idea, encourage them to look up and see if there are any franchises in the area that are looking to expand. This next slide, as it relates to these downtown revitalization strategies, we've put together 6 we call them success essentials, 6 things that local leaders or independents, downtowns have to do in order to succeed. So the first things first, you got to understand your customer. You got to know who is in your market, and you got to know them so well that the merchandise lines that your local retailers are carrying are of interest to your market. So we're going to kind of walk you through how to determine some of those things. But point number 1, you got to, when you're understanding your consumer, you got to understand your retail trade area. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the retail trade area, this is how we define a community. The town that I've referred to quite a bit here, Tupelo, its population is about 40,000 people, but there's a large regional mall here. And when talking about Tupelo from an economic development perspective, people will ask, well, what's its trade area? Tupelo's trade area is about 500,000 people. About 500,000 people consider the Tupelo Mall their mall. We work for a small town in Ohio called Xenia, and Xenia is a suburb of Dayton, a great town, and we'll show you an aerial of their downtown here in a second. But when looking at the Xenia market, they are much more than just their population. They are probably 3 times the size of their population in trade area size. So we define a trade area as the area from which consumers are willing to travel to purchase retail goods and services about 80 or 85% of the time. So on this slide here, what you're looking at is in red is what we call a geofence. So we have a data provider that allows us to draw these geofences, and they can essentially tell us the distance from which people are traveling to that fence to purchase items. And this is, if we were looking at a satellite image, you would see that this is a downtown. But we drew a fence around their entire downtown. So we're trying to collect this mobile location data to determine sort of the reach of that downtown. So when we ask our data provider to give us the data back, we get something that looks like this. And we're looking at density only. So I've put a star there on the location of that downtown, but we've backed the map out so you can kind of see these other towns from which people are traveling to this downtown to purchase goods and services. So this particular downtown, you can see that the trade area reach is rather large. On the next slide, it looks like a large thunderstorm or rain cloud is sitting over the middle of this downtown, but this is that same data, just presented in another way. And again, we're looking at density here. So you can see that the red, the more dense area is where there's a higher likelihood that those people are coming from this certain area into that downtown market to purchase a good or service. And so our job here at the Retail Coach is to first, when we're understanding our consumer, is to determine that trade area. And so when we have looked at this data closely, we go in and we hand draw the trade area based off of the reports and the data points that have been given back to us from our data provider. So you can see here that this sort, yeah, go ahead.
Let me just add real quick. I know to a lot of people, this might sound a little scary, kind of Big Brother-ish, knowing that we can track your household address based off of your cell phone. But you can imagine from a retailer, a restaurant, whether it's a local retailer or restaurant, or it's a national retailer or restaurant, this type of data right here is powerful. So if you haven't had a cell phone analysis done on your community, on your downtown area, this is kind of the newest thing that's out there. And you know, we started introducing this to retailers, restaurants, developers about 2 years ago, and it's extremely powerful. So again, it might be Big Brother-ish, it might sound scary, but from a retailer's point of view, restaurant's point of view, this is super valuable information to have. Yeah, no doubt. And so again, we're trying to understand our consumers. So we have sort of specifically hand-drawn what we believe the trade area for this particular town is. So once we determine our trade area, that whole understanding your consumer idea, we need to determine the demographic makeup of that trade area. So you can see here that that particular town is a population of somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 people. But that map that's drawn there, the blue map shows that there's about 50,000 people that live within the Baldwin, Mississippi trade area. You can see the ethnicity breakdown. You can see their median and average household income breakdown, the age of the people who live within that trade area, and sort of their education attainment level. So this demographic breakdown is incredibly important to retailers and restaurants when they're looking at a certain market, because they need to know who comes into that market to shop. We take it a step further. So some of you might have heard of psychographics, but psychographics are basically demographics on steroids. So you can see here from this next slide, and I know the font may be a little small, but the psychographic breakdown, again, it's basically demographics that are demographics times 1,000. And so this will tell you, of those 50,000 people, this will tell you what it is that they're into. So those 50,000 people, depending on the market, might be into, you know, driving a BMW and wearing a suit and tie to work. But I can assure you that in this small southern town, that those 50,000 people, the majority of which aren't driving a BMW and wearing a suit and tie to work. So that's what psychographics explain, and that's what retailers and restaurants like to know. They like to know, am I talking to a crowd of people who drive pickup trucks, or am I talking to a crowd of people who drive small, compact cars that are eco-friendly? And so once you know, to understand your consumer, you need to know your trade area, you need to know your demographic breakdown of that trade area, you need to know your psychographic makeup of that trade area, and then lastly, you need to know the buying power or the purchasing power of that market, of your trade area. And so this is an example, not the same as this small Mississippi town, but this is a town in South Mississippi, a client of ours that is a population of around 5,000 people and a trade area around 80,000, but they have a consumer buying power of around $1 billion. So what that means is this particular market has $1 billion of disposable income that they're going to spend on goods, that we believe that they are going to spend on goods and services. And so our job at the Retail Coach is to identify that.
to identify what dollars are leaving your trade area, are leaving your market, and try to capture that, cut it off so that they stay at home. Moving on to the success essential number. Yeah, go ahead.
I know you touched on this a second ago, but the importance that we always stress in communities is how important this information is twofold. So as a city official, as an economic developer, being able to really understand opportunities in your downtown, but then even holding, whether it's small workshops or even one-on-one sessions with downtown retailers and business owners and giving them information that can help their business, right? So if they know where people are coming from to shop downtown, that can help with their marketing and their advertising. If they understand the buying potential in the community, then they can start to cater to what people are actually leaving the community to go buy. And that can really be a huge impact on small businesses, is giving them some data they may not have, or insights into, hey, here's what our community wants and needs, and here's how you can cater to those needs. Really big impact on sales that way.
Yeah, no doubt, and we've seen this, and we in a number of our towns that we work in across the country, we put together this data. I would say 9 times out of 10 for the entire city limits or the entire, but we make this available to the downtown, to the existing retailers, because we want to introduce them to data that they may have not considered yet. And so I think that it's important to know the sort of the buying power. And you can see on this slide that's on the screen now that this is broken down into certain retail sectors. So you can really zero in on a certain, it might be that you're a shoe store and sales are declining, but you're presented with this sort of buying power or gap analysis study, and you see, wow, I noticed that, I know that shoes are struggling for me, but it really looks like people are going out and buying a lot of hats. And so oftentimes these gap studies will help existing retailers focus in on or zero in on adding a new existing merchandise line, and they can start marketing specifically to the certain demographic or psychographic makeup of their community. So step number 1 was you got to understand your market, and then number 2 in the success essentials is you got to understand the importance of a good location. And to do that, you need to determine what exactly is a good location. So in this slide here, you can see that this is a large retail center next to a downtown in Xenia, Ohio. And so a lot of people really like the idea of having these large markets or magnets next to downtown, because they really think that it gives that walkability feel, and it makes shopping in downtowns a lot more enticing if people can shop downtown but also maybe hit some of these large box retailers. So this is a good example of where a downtown has turned their focus on redeveloping this existing shopping center because its proximity next to their downtown, and it's interesting because it's not nearby an interstate. So how do you determine a good location? So good visibility from a main street. You need to have consistent traffic counts and legible signage. And one thing that we definitely encourage redevelopment, local leaders is to don't ever sacrifice a good location for cheap rent. We have seen that has cost a lot of good development projects to not become as fruitful as they could. And so we have identified in this particular downtown in upstate New York, we have identified what their downtown, what we would consider a good retail location, as opposed to sort of that secondary retail location. So the retail potential of the green highlighted here, we would consider high, and then sort of a secondary focus is this what's highlighted in blue. But again, you need to have good visibility from the main street. So that public square is a main street that sees tens of thousands of cars a day. And we've worked with this local downtown on how can we make sure that people know that we exist down here, and let them know that it's also easy to get here, and that parking is free, is available. And so we work with them to put together a parking map. And this is something that you might consider because I think oftentimes that this is overlooked. And so this is an example based off of what we consider in Watertown, New York to be the parking that is most suited for those high-end top retail possibilities for downtown Watertown. So this is something that you might consider doing if you haven't done so already. Success essential number 3, you need to identify potential retailers. So some things you need to ask yourself, what is my trade area's buying or purchasing power? What nearby communities am I competing against? And what retail sectors is my trade area or my downtown leaking the most dollars? So local leaders need to understand that they're consumers and accommodate them by providing goods and services they want to buy. In this particular example, this was a boutique store that sold really high-end candles. Well, the market makeup of where this particular store was located, they aren't into buying high-end candles. Quite frankly, they likely aren't into buying candles at all. And if they absolutely have to buy a candle, they'll likely go to Walmart and buy the most inexpensive candle that they want. So in this example, we encouraged the owner of this store to start selling products that you aren't into necessarily. Maybe you are, but start focusing on what your consumer is into. And so those $30 candles didn't work well in this particular community, but the store owner has considered opening other merchandise or retail lines that have helped her quite a bit in capturing more goods and service, more sales as folks come into her store. Next, you need to market your downtowns. We said this earlier, you got to get online. Local retailers and restaurants have to have an online presence in some way. We support this idea of considering, what store hours are you going to operate under, and we also have encouraged our local downtown independent store owners and some of the communities that we work in to introduce this idea of multi-channel marketing, which I'll touch on in a second. But look, I talked earlier about developing a plan. In this example, in Xenia, Ohio, this local shoe store has really adopted the idea of having an online presence, and so they have a website that folks from across the country now use to repair their leather goods and services, leather goods. And so this is one example where a downtown saw that the market was declining, that consumers aren't coming in as often as they should. And so they decided they would go online in some way. And so they have done an exceptional job of going online and making sure that they're capturing as much of that market that they can. Another thing that we've noticed that we encourage downtown store owners and local and independents to do is consider the store hours that they are open. You can see here that approximately 65 retail business is transacted between 4 and 9 p.m. Well, if that's the case, most retail stores that I'm aware of and most local stores that I'm aware of usually operate from 10 to 5 p.m. And so if that's the market that you're looking to capture from 10 to 5 p.m., most people that have disposable income are at work. And so maybe you consider working alongside your downtown where one day a week or one day a month, you and all the other stores in your downtown decide to stay open till 9 p.m. so that you can get that consumer who's coming home from work into your store, because getting people in your store and then converting that visit to a sale is how local independents are remaining competitive.
I think it's a great example, Will. I live just outside of Austin, Texas, and I know in our downtown, they'll have a night a week, typically on Tuesday nights, where they'll bring in different food trucks, and retailers will stay open late. It's kind of that experiential feeling for downtown. It kind of feels like it's an event vibe going on. And so that's been really successful here is really kind of tying in and getting everybody to invest in, even if it's just one night a week, having those extended hours and kind of grouping that together to make that a true shopping experience.
Yeah, no doubt. And so I mentioned earlier about this multi-channel marketing idea. And so in addition to your physical store, like I said, you need to encourage your local independents to have a website. Maybe that's Facebook. You need to encourage them to utilize email and correspondence. Maybe direct mail campaigns might also be beneficial. And if they have the capacity to open some sort of app, then do that as well. But these are all ways that, based on the trends that we've seen nationally, these are ways to capture and bring attention to your store in the digital age. And so there are a number of different ways to do this, but having a website is definitely key. So success essential number 5, you need to recruit retailers to come to your downtown. So once you know your market and determine sort of your demographic makeup, once you've identified who it is that comes into your market to shop, once you've identified sort of the locations and what's a good versus maybe a not so good location, once you've marketed your downtown some, now comes the time to recruit potential retailers to your downtown. So you've zeroed in sort of on who you think is a good fit. And so we believe that proactive recruitment is the only way to recruit. So you have to be proactive in retail recruitment, whether it's national brands, regional brands, or if you're trying to expand your downtown and you want to reach local retailers who are in nearby markets to come into your downtown to potentially open maybe a second store. That is one good way to market your downtown. Is an example in upstate New York. To market those potential, to market downtown Watertown to nearby communities, we canvassed and literally going door to door, knocking on retailers in other downtown markets nearby to see if, hey, look, let me introduce you to Watertown. Let's see if you have any interest in opening a second store. We want to show you, here's the availability in this particular town. Here is the consumer who shops in this particular town, and here's their buying power in each retail sector. But again, you have to get out and recruit proactively. It's the only way to do it. Being reactive for the last 30 years or so is why downtowns is one reason why downtowns and sort of that community core has suffered.
Hey, Will and Aaron, we have a question from one of the attendees that plays in perfectly here, and they say, we're a Main Street community. Do you endorse Main Street economic development? And I think our answer is absolutely yes. We would absolutely encourage Main Street economic development. We think every community should do that. Aaron, Will, you guys want to expand on that?
Yeah, I'll add to that. Yeah, we're big fans of the Main Street program. And, honestly, your downtown is going to, in most communities, your downtown has a different draw than, let's say, your other retail areas. So maybe it's a mall in your community, or maybe it's a Walmart supercenter. Downtown is going to have a different draw. So economic development needs to happen in downtowns or on main streets. And it's just, it looks a little bit differently, like Will is talking about here, than it does maybe on a main corridor or something like that. So absolutely, kind of support that economic development for main streets. One thing we didn't talk about is wayfinding. And I think wayfinding is key as well. If you've got people coming to your communities that are shopping, maybe at the Walmart Supercenter, maybe at the mall or a grocery store, wayfinding and signage like that can be very helpful in driving people to downtown areas. So yes, so the answer is yes. Big fans of economic development with Main Street.
Yeah, no doubt there. And so lastly, once you've sort of identified your market and your consumer and the purchasing power of your consumer, and you've started to recruit potential retailers, I want to take recruitment of retailers a step further. You also need to recruit developers. So developers are really the ones who get the job, who get things done. and you got to find the right partner. You want the developer to share the same vision that you have for your city. And so oftentimes we see that developers are typically local, but you want to identify a list of these people. So when it comes time to, once you've understood your market and really maybe you found a retailer that is interested in maybe opening a store in your community, you need to match them with a developer or somebody who can come in and shape up a storefront that is suitable to this particular retailer or restaurant. But you want to make sure that when doing so, that these developers, also share the same vision that you do for your community. And so I wanted to sum all this up in one slide. So like I mentioned earlier, in sort of a takeaway slide for the trend section, I also put together a takeaway slide for this strategy section. And so, look, if there's one slide that you paid attention to, I really would want it to be this one. But look, you got to know your community. You got to know your retail trade area, your demographic and psychographic makeup, and you need to know the buying power of your community. A step further, you need to know your availability. So once you've determined who you are, you need to know what you offer. And so we recommend at the Retail Coach that communities or local folks, local leaders, Main Street Association should conduct a downtown-wide sites inventory, where that is, what you consider your downtown or your Main Street corridor, really looking at it as a whole unit, but putting together a spreadsheet where once we start identifying retailers, that you have something that you can put before them or answer those questions. Well, what do you have available? Well, it's funny you ask, because we've taken the time to put together sort of that downtown-wide sites inventory. Once you know your community, once you know your availability, you need to build a target list of retailers and restaurants. When we are conducting this sort of target list of retailers and restaurants, we like to run what we call a void analysis, where we will run to see what's missing in a certain market. We'll see where the void is, and we try to fill that gap with national, regional, or local or independent retailers. And so we recommend using that tool, running a void against some of the communities that you're competing against. Step number 4, you got to market yourselves, whether it's on a website, whether it's through reports or files that you have the ability to send on moment's notice, having those files uploaded to an iPad, and attending conferences. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but there's sort of a governing body that the retail industry as a whole works under, and it's called the International Council of Shopping Centers, or ICSC. They host a number of conferences throughout the year, both at a national level, at a regional level, and then at even a micro-regional level. So I highly recommend going to icsc.org, looking at their conference schedules, seeing if there's something close by to you that you might attend. But this is really where you go do it. This is where we go to network, to meet the developers, to meet the brokers, to meet the retailers themselves. But this is what we call deal-making conferences. And so I highly encourage community leaders to look and see if this is something that they can invest in, because the returns on it are great. You got to recruit proactively. Like I said earlier, proactive recruitment is the only recruitment. So retailers, developers, brokers, and site selectors all attend these conferences. So once you get your website up and running, once you kind of have reports put together, your downtown sites inventory, you know your demographics, you know your psychographics, you know how many dollars you're leaking in a certain retail sector. You attend these conferences, and this is where you proactively recruit developers and retailers and brokers. And so, kind of building on that, you can also do this at a local level, where, like I mentioned earlier, that we did do some canvassing for some of our communities. You can also do that if you have time and go door to door in downtowns that are nearby. But essentially what you're looking for is the doers, the people who are willing to come in and make things happen. And like I said, those are typically developers. So partnering and finding the right developer who share the same vision is incredibly important in local or downtown revitalization efforts.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, it's right at 10:50. We're gonna open up to questions and answers. So we're gonna get to some of the questions that we have here. Before we do that, just a quick note on incentives. We often get asked about incentives and what role they should play in downtown retail and revitalization. Aaron, well, I'll open that up to y'all quickly, but I think the answer for us is kind of it depends, right? We've certainly seen incentives do really well in certain communities, and then other times they don't do well. Depending on where you're at, there are different incentives available to you, and so it's hard to answer that with a blanket statement for all 50 states. But in general, if you can offer incentives and it can build your community the right way, we're fans of using those as long as it's something that's really going to help and be beneficial for your community. From a downtown perspective, we're huge fans of really that community development, wayfinding, making sure the infrastructure looks good, that the facades are great. But Aaron and Will, what would you recommend there for communities thinking about incentives or trying to wrap their minds around that?
Yeah, so Austin, just to emphasize here, we're not huge fans of incentives at the retail coach, but we realize they're necessary in certain situations. Those situations are when it's going to have a positive impact on the downtown. Will other retailers, restaurants see this is a good thing? Will they improve their businesses as well if you incentivize a company to come in or to upgrade their facade or something like that? Some of the most common incentives we see in downtown areas are specifically matching grant programs. So that would be a case where maybe it's a facade enhancement or a sign enhancement, where an economic development corporation, maybe it's a Main Street program or even a city, will devote maybe 30, 50,000 to a downtown area and give the opportunity for local businesses to get a grant. And most of the time you see they're matching grants. So if a business will put in, $1,500 to maybe paint the front of their building and maybe add some awnings or something like that, then the EDC or the city or the downtown organization will match that. So matching grant programs, same thing with the sign enhancement program. A lot of times what we see in downtown areas are these signs that are falling down, or sometimes hand painted signs or something like that. So a sign incentive program, again, I like the idea of doing a matching grant program for the signs. And then also, you just like you would in some larger retail areas, sometimes we'll see sales tax abatements or sales tax rebates that take place. You've got the TIF districts, tax increment financing districts, in certain states that you can use as well. But a lot of times we'll see positive things where it's a domino effect. You incentivize one company, another one wants to come and do the same, and you start to see your downtown redevelop or develop in a good way. So those are just some of the incentives that we see on a regular basis in downtown areas.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna jump into some of our questions. And if you're still hanging on with us and you have questions, feel free to add them to that box. We'll get to as many as we can. If we don't get to your question, feel free to reach out to us directly. You can email info@theretailcoach.net or give us a call at the office number there, and we'll get back to you. But jumping into our first question, Aaron, I'll leave this open for either of y'all. What is the best way to recruit locally based mom and pop type stores to a downtown?
So, we'll all take that question. I mean, what we've seen work well in communities that we've worked in and we've helped with really is holding some franchise fairs or local entrepreneur type workshops where we're coming in and sharing what Will talked about, the trade area, the gap analysis, the leakage analysis, where the opportunities are. So that's one way to do it, is through like a franchise fair or local entrepreneur workshop. Another option is if you're looking to recruit maybe a little bit more regional stores, maybe they have 2 or 3 within your region, is reach out directly to those stores, reach out directly to those companies. Maybe they have a store that's 30 miles from you. Reach out to the local store, find out who the owner is, find out who you need to talk to, and do some more local/regional recruitment as well. That seems to work well in our experience.
Yeah, no doubt. Like I mentioned earlier, just about canvassing. I mean, I know it's time consuming, but it really does work. And those franchise fairs are incredibly helpful. So, you can use the social media platforms to sort of get the word out that you're hosting a franchise fair for folks interested. And who knows how quickly or how wide that word might spread. But yeah, I definitely echo Aaron's sentiments about franchise fairs and those entrepreneur type workshops.
Great. And I think this plays into that first question, but since so much of the value in cool downtown areas is tied to unique experiences, retailers, etc., is there a good resource for finding and contacting unique retailers who are looking to expand?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know that there is, but it sounds like something that could be useful, especially to downtowns who are looking to enter that sort of unique experiential retail market. Aaron, do you have anything on that?
No, I mean, I think again, you just need to just get out there, start calling on some retailers or restaurants in your region that are maybe more local, regional based, but I'm not familiar with a specific database or anything like that.
I think where we've had the most success is, and Aaron, I'm thinking about a project you worked on recently. Is we travel to different regions and we see unique retailers and we just strike up a conversation and build a relationship with them, and then when you can point to data that says, hey, we're really similar to where you're successful now, you can talk to retailers and get them interested in the market. Aaron, I know you just did that with a burger chain out of Austin, and we're able to convince them to go to a new market in a sort of downtown setting they wouldn't have considered before. So I think that's certainly a big aspect of it is finding those and then going and convincing them to give your market a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So third question here, what are some strategies in dealing with inactive downtown property owners? So property owners who have no desire to redevelop or sell and might just be sitting on their property.
That can be difficult. We see that a lot of times in downtown settings and also outside of downtown settings. But find out if it's an out-of-state owner. Reach out to them. Maybe if you're on a trip, you're in Los Angeles, and that owner is in Los Angeles. Try to meet with them in person there. One of the things that we would recommend is just not to forget about those, but move on. Move on to where there are owners, where there are people there wanting to do those things, and then come back to those towards the end. Maybe they'll change their tune, but a lot of times we see that where you've got inactive downtown owners or out of state downtown owners. So it's hard to give you an answer on that. If they're not abiding by codes, if they're not keeping their property up to code, if they're not keeping it looking nice, you might have some things in your toolbox as a city or as an economic development organization to reach out to them to get them to fix some of these things. But focus on those downtown owners that are willing to make some improvements, are willing to focus on that.
Great. Well, guys, we're at an hour, so we're going to wrap up the presentation. If you have any additional questions or specific questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us at info@theretailcoach.net or the office number there on the screen. Aaron, Will, any last words for city officials, economic developers that are looking at downtown growth or opportunities?
Just like we said, kind of follow this framework that we put together. It works. We've seen it work wonders in a number of communities. Really, you can't stress it enough, but don't forget about your downtown. I see a lot of communities that really forget about their downtown and they focus on other things. So at the Retail Coach, we look at the downtown as kind of the pulse and the heartbeat of the community. So make sure you put a focus on that. And if you have any other questions, like Austin mentioned, reach out to us at info@theretailcoach.net. Would love to talk to you specifically about your downtown and what you're dealing with there. And, appreciate you joining us today. Will, do you have anything to kind of end off on?
Yeah, I mean, I know that oftentimes when you're on the attendee end of a webinar or something like this, you just feel like you're being talked to with so many different points and so much information. But I definitely encourage you guys to just pick up the phone and call us. I would much rather have a conversation with you than at you. And so, yeah, feel free to call us. And thank you all for taking a little time out of your morning to attend.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And thank you for attending. We didn't note this earlier, but we'll be sending out the slides after this webinar along with a recording as well. So we'll send those over to you so you can have those and share those with whoever you'd like to on your team. But thanks for attending and hope you all stay warm. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Will.
Bye.
Thank you, Austin.
All right, bye.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.